Welcome all to another real-time session. Today we're talking with Chad Mairn, and I want to appreciate everyone who's been with us. We will have the archive up available. I want to let you know of a few things that are coming up. Next week, once again, we do this every Tuesday and Thursday morning, 9 o'clock Eastern Time. Next Tuesday, Brad and Lucy Green will be here to discuss fostering literacy through music. Lucy is an amazing, she's on my faculty teaching school libraries, and Brad Green, her husband, has a PhD in musicology and music theory, and they're going to talk about particularly how parents and librarians and youth librarians can foster learning through music. On the 23rd, then Thursday, Jeroen de Boer from the Netherlands will be joining us to talk about librarians in terms of privacy of their data and data detox. And general awareness regarding these topics. Jeroen is a fantastic innovator who's run everything from new programs in libraries to building the Frisk Lab, which was a makerspace on wheels. And then on April 30, Maria Ostergaard, the director of the Aarhus Public Library in Denmark, I think one of the best libraries, public libraries in the world, will join us, and we will have a conversation around democratic infrastructure. There's some really interesting movements going on in the EU, actually in library legislation requiring libraries to participate and foster democratic dialogue and debate. So it's a really fascinating discussion. So with that, let me do a brief introduction. Chad Mairn is a librarian, teacher, author, and self-described geek who frequently shares his enthusiasms for all things technology as a speaker at library technology conferences. He's an information services librarian, assistant professor, and manages the innovation lab at St. Petersburg College, which is in Florida. Where in Florida?
Florida, yep. It's technically in Seminole, Florida, but
Okay.
Tampa, St. Pete area.
Okay, very cool. In October 2015, the Innovation Lab received a $7,500 Curiosity Creates grant from the Walt Disney Company in collaboration with ALA's Association for Library Services to Children to expand the successful Maker Bootcamp series that helps promote exploration and discovery for children's ages 6 to 14. Imagination and originality, flexibility, decision-making, communication, self-expression, collaboration, motivation are the critical components of the creativity that the Maker Bootcamp has integrated into their curriculum, and even linked to documentary. While an undergraduate studying humanities at the University of South Florida, Chad was awarded the Library of Congress Fellowship, archiving the Leonard Bernstein's personal papers. During his library and information science graduate work, also at USF, Chad became a technology liaison between the Bill Gates Learning Foundation and the Florida Public Libraries. So welcome. It's great to see you.
You too.
Did we like actually meet originally at, I want to say, oh, where was it?
It was actually at FLA. You were a keynote speaker. It was a few years, God, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I know, we go on forever.
It might have been on the beach. It might have been one of the ones that was actually on the beach, which was nice.
Very cool. Yeah. So thank you for coming. I know today we're going to be talking about a lot of what you've learned in that innovation lab. And as also a self-described geek, I'm glad that we're representing today.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of discussion around what could be going on with augmented reality, virtual reality, different ways of sort of using technology in physical spaces and creating a hybrid spaces with virtual. And I think that that's a real area of investigation. And so I'm so glad you're here to give us some pointers. And so I think you have a introduction prepared. So I want to sort of step out of the way and hear what's going on.
Yeah, let me get that slide real quick. And here it is. All right, so I'll kind of breeze through this really quick and maybe pause here and there. If there's any questions, we can go through it. So extended reality is so I look at that X, which can really stand for anything. And so there's the 360-degree photos or videos. You got virtual reality, which is completely immersed in that space. Augmented reality, you can still see your surroundings. You got kind of like a digital overlay on top of reality. Mixed reality and spatial computing, those are when you can kind of, the digital objects kind of know that they're digital objects and they know that you're in the room with them, which is interesting. And then you've got 3D scanning and I already mentioned spatial computing. So it's this full spectrum of immersive technology. And so the immersive technology side is when you extend your physical world by digital simulations that give you that sense of immersion. What's really interesting about the mixed reality and spatial computing is that the programming behind the scenes actually does follow the rules of gravity in space. So essentially, your actual physical space becomes your interface. So we're starting to see XR technologies in a ton of industries, art, education in particular, real estate, all these different things, libraries. So I look at it as XR really has this potential to bring people, places, and experiences closer together. And now with this pandemic, this is almost like a perfect time to start exploring this kind of thing. So just a couple statistics, some of the top industries.
Chad, just need to make sure you're sharing the slides.
Oh, you're not seeing the slides?
Nope. I think we tried it out and then we turned it off, so we need to turn it on again.
Let me try it one more time. Let's try it one more. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
So now it should be working, hopefully.
Yeah, there we go. We have the infinite screen. Perfect. We're on it.
So here's all the stuff that I just kind of rambled on about. There's a screen. I'll give you guys these slides too. And so here's the second one here. So some of the industries that are actually using XR, business and consumer. And I'm not going to read all that to you, but I think it's interesting where in that source down at the bottom, that XR, I think it's going to become mainstream within the next kind of 1 to 3 years. We're starting to see, we're not wearing big computers on our head anymore. We're starting to see glasses, even contact lenses coming into the picture. So it's going to start becoming more and more mainstream when it becomes just part of our glasses that we usually wear. I'm not going to, these two studies, so it's sort of like the, what's the other EDUCAUSE one that comes out?
The Horizon Report?
The Horizon Report, yes. So these are kind of like the Horizon Report. If you have time, skim through them, but learning in 3 dimensions and XR for teaching. So really, I think the Cliff Note version of it all is, with XR, you can start to explore the unexplorable. Right, like so, atoms. I mean, I can hold and manipulate an atom now, and really kind of get inside of it. Before we never were able to do that. So these reports get into all the nuances of that, and I think it's really interesting. So definitely check those out if you have time. And then another program, Penn Immersive. They have a complete section on XR research. And what I love about it is I've highlighted here, they're supporting the production, availability, and preservation of knowledge in its many manifestations. And it goes down to say that it's essential that library staff directly engage in the knowledge creation lifecycle. And I love that. So it's not just one kind of geeky person doing it all. It's everybody who's curious about it to understand how it works. Now, this is the part that I love. When I'm in my lab, I get to work with students who have never done it before, never done VR. And I'm working with American history, a couple American history programs and some English composition classes that come into the lab to use what we have. And with the VR side of it, we started to catalog all of our VR and AR apps. So if a student's doing research on, let's say, Pearl Harbor, well, they can do a search for Pearl Harbor. They can find a couple books, some journal magazine articles, whatever, maybe the movie. But then they can see, what's this Remembering Pearl Harbor? That's a virtual reality kind of an experience. So now they can come in the lab and experience, Pearl Harbor in 360 degrees. So it's just another way for them to learn. And then this is another exciting part of my job is I get to see people that have never done it before for the first time. And in this case, this student was actually blind in one eye, and he didn't think he could actually do it. He's like, I don't think it's going to work. But when he put it on, he was blown away. You can kind of tell by the smile on his face. But what it did is it helped increase his periphery vision to his functioning eye. So he was able to paint in beautiful 3D and using this app called Tilt Brush. So just some amazing things you can do with it. But just his smile, I think, says it all. I've been really interested lately in doing virtual reality talks actually inside virtual reality. So this was, I'm the middle person there. I was in New York City in a hotel, and I was presenting to the group that's in Tampa right there. But you can see on the screen on the right, it's really kind of hard to see, but I'm that little avatar guy in there presenting. And so I was able to interact with all those people that have headsets on. And it's just an interesting way to be able to bring in 3D content and just discuss virtual reality actually in that space. So it's sort of, it reminds me of Second Life in a way, but you're completely immersed in this environment. Since we've all been using Zoom lately, in one way or another, I just wanted to point this out. So this is my son on his phone using Zoom, and I'm actually in VR, and we're doing Zoom meetings. So I think this is really kind of a cool way to, and I'm holding the COVID virus right there. But anyway, I'm able to interact in my usual space, but I'm still working with people that aren't in VR. So I'm able to share my screen and go through, and sort of like I'm doing now, but I would be inside VR. So this is brand new. Spaces, it works on Microsoft Teams, it works in Google Hangouts, it works in Skype, and it's, like I said, it's brand new, and the developers are actually really great. So if you want to learn and help kind of build this software, you can jump on the Discord page that they have and help them make good software. So beta testing is great.
What's the name of that? I'm sorry.
It's called Spaces, and I can send you some links to this stuff too. And learn, Brian, I'm not going to say too much about this, but this is where if you want to create your own kind of simulations, you can do that. But I will say it's pretty expensive. But if you go into something like this, CoSpaces, I do a lot of workshops with kids too. So I work in a college. It's a joint use library. So I get to work with kids, but I also work with college students and faculty. But we use CoSpaces, and that's a way for kids to tell stories or develop games or do AR. You can see the kid on the right is holding a merge cube, and he's actually playing a game. You know, he's holding the merge cube and then interacting with the game that way. So it's like a hologram. So these CoSpaces is like a learning management system, but for virtual and augmented realities. And it's really not difficult to get started. And then these kids design on either a computer or a tablet, and then we go up to the lab and actually get to see their work in virtual reality. Another project that we worked on, we do a lot of partnering with museums, and they did a veterans reality program where veterans would come in and they would tell their story about their service and that sort of thing. And then they went into Tilt Brush and they actually kind of designed some kind of sculpture. And then they came to me and said, hey, are you able to 3D print these? So we were able to go inside virtual reality, find their sculptures, export them out, put them in Blender or some kind of 3D authoring tool, and then 3D print them. And then they put them on display down there at the bottom. Really great project to be able to kind of design in VR, get your ideas out, and then bring them into the physical world where people can see them. Now, this is something I'm really excited about. This is called Spatial, and I'm actually on their beta testing team right now and have been on their early access since like last September. So you can see that there's a person on the bottom left interacting with that 3D object with their phone. So they don't have to be in that environment. And then you see at the bottom right, there's people wearing all these different headsets, Magic Leap, HoloLens, HoloLens 2, the Quest. They've also started using these glasses called Nreal glasses, which I'll show you a picture of them in a minute. So what I like about this, though, is I've got a couple videos here. The one I'm going to play and kind of narrate over is the one on the right. So this is my office, and I'm meeting with about 10 to 12 different people from all over the world, and it's like they're in my office. And then the main developer actually brought in a Sprint store, and it's, again, seeing it in 2D right now doesn't do it any justice. When you are in this space, it's amazing. So now I'm interacting with all these people. You can see he's going to bring this model down pretty small, and we're all interacting, and it feels like we're all in the same room together. And we've been testing this for a while. And now that I'm on lockdown, it's interesting to see these people in my living room now. But it's just a way for us to all interact. It's like we're all right there. And I'll tell you, one guy actually walked by me the other day, and I actually moved out of the way. It was so real. So my idea is, imagine creating a classroom. You could have a variety of different classrooms that you just superimpose over your reality to kind of enhance learning. And it's not difficult to do, and especially when you have glasses. And also, I will say that they're bringing like a Zoom-like feature in too for people that aren't in that space. They can still be on their computer or their phones and still interact in that space. So here's what they did. This is all Spatial for Autism Acceptance Month. So you can see there's a bunch of presentations up, and it's a different way, kind of Minority Report way to interact with information. If anybody ever wants to test this, I'll give you my contact information. We can test this right now. It's really an amazing experience. I don't know if you saw this, but they have fever detecting AR glasses now coming out of China. And I just read before I logged in that they're coming to the US apparently. So authorities will be able to walk around. I know there's tons of privacy issues, but they'll be able to see wearing these glasses who's got a fever or not, and be able to better detect what's going on. So here's those Nreal glasses in the middle. I think what's going to happen soon when we see, because the Nreal glasses work on 5G networks. So, and the XR chipset is super fast, which is why we can wear smaller glasses now. So with 5G networks, you're going to be able to render high definition 3D content anywhere. And so I can just throw my glasses on and just be wherever I need to be and meet with somebody like I'm just right there with them. So that whole holodeck concept is right there. So basically getting into something like this, you can be in virtual reality doing like Google Earth, exploring that, and then go down to street mode and then actually get right in to the street. And then if you have your powerful AR glasses on in that 5G network, you're going to be able to almost be like on that Japanese street. So pretty amazing. And so here's some watching somebody paint in VR, actually in VR, is a pretty interesting way to watch this happen.
How meta.
Yes, right. So Anatomy X, I just want to show a couple of examples of this too. This is ways for people to study anatomy, like it's right there in front of you. So on the left is me wearing a HoloLens. So this is a fairly large cadaver in one of the offices. So it's hard to see, but as I'm looking at the different parts, you can see it being labeled. And it can speak it to me if I want. I can go through and I can actually, as I walk through the body, it starts to peel it back layer by layer. And this is another killer app. So I think Spatial with that, holographic meeting space where we can interact like we're right there. And then this Anatomy and Physiology app. And so this is on the other side. This is students wearing a Magic Leap and a HoloLens, and they're actually studying for their A&P exam. And that's how I'm seeing what they're doing is on the iPad. And they're going through and kind of dissecting the heart, going through the different parts and quizzing themselves on it. They told me that this is way better than using 3D models because you can go down to the minutia part of it and remove parts and see underneath those parts, and it's a really good way to learn. Skip that. We've been doing some 3D 360 like promo videos, so those are pretty fun. So it's completely immersive. So as we watch this simulation center and you put your VR goggles on, you don't have to wear a VR headset, but when you do, it's like you're in that room with those people doing the simulation. And of course, you can now edit this type of video wearing your VR headset. So that's through Adobe Premiere. You just plug in your headset, and then you can edit video like you're completely immersed in it, which makes sense to me. Let's see, I'm going to skip over some of this stuff. Oh, so this was fun. So I do a lot with younger kids too. And so we did this was a class that I had of, I want to say 80 or 60 eighth graders. And so I shot a 360-degree photo, and then we did a class on virtual reality. And so what I did was I took this 360, and I was able to superimpose the virtual reality stuff on it and get it to move. So in a minute, you'll see a little kid over here sleeping, and I put a mouse in front of him, and then there's a dinosaur dancing, and you can see the clock is moving. So it's a still picture, but we're able to go in and kind of tell a story in a way. Let's see. I think this is an interesting thing too. So that whole concept of being able to go in a space that maybe we're not allowed to go into, like a cave or something. Laser scanning is now starting to reveal all kinds of minutia and things that you normally don't see. So a good example is the Notre Dame. So when it was unfortunately burning, I had students that were very curious. So we actually visited there from the Innovation Lab through Google Earth VR. And we were able to get right up to it and see what's going on. You can actually get models of this too from those laser scans and put those into your VR space and interact like you're there. And so that's an immense learning tool too. And if you ever get a chance, the 360-degree VR documentary on rebuilding Notre Dame is stunning. It actually at one point almost brought me to tears. The music and the destruction, completely immersive experience was beautiful. Very well told. And then 3D scanning is a big part of it too. So we do, and you can see I bring kids in as much as I can. A lot of college students help too, but we're able to 3D scan, and one of our projects is we're 3D scanning these dinosaur fossils at another local museum. And so we're 3D scanning them because right now they're underneath the case and there's reflection and all this. So we can actually 3D scan those and then put them, make them augmented reality, or we can put them in virtual reality, or we can just put them in 360 degrees on their website. We also do some photogrammetry, which is a little bit more difficult. You take a bunch of photos of something and then you stitch it all together in software, and that takes a little bit more time. So here's an idea of this group that I work with scanning themselves and then putting them in their own space. And then you can see we made the girl really small next to a water bottle and then put her in VR. So these young kids are learning how to do all this right now, which is just fun to watch. So I presented with Carl Grant at NISO Plus a few months back, and I stole this slide from him. I love what they're doing. So they've got all these 3D models, but they're integrating them into their discovery tool. So if you want, you could search for those, sort of like we did with the VR. You could search for those and just take those models and put them directly into the VR station, or you can embed them directly into your course from the discovery tool in the library. And I think that's just an awesome way to do it. I'm sure you've all seen this, where you can now do a search in Google and get certain 3D objects and see those 3D objects in your space. Like that's really cool. So I was like, I want to take it a step further. So on the left is a video that I did. So it's basically like a pretend student paper. And as you scroll down, you're reading all the stuff. They can write their paper. They can add a 2D thumbnail if they want, and that's great. But if it's a sculpture or something like this, we can embed that 3D content, and then now the student can show it this way. But if they're in the classroom, they can then open it up on their phone or whatever, and then view this in their space. So being able to add that 3D content into a research paper is huge. So now they can actually walk around this object like they just read about in their paper. So this is like my first little prototype test to see if it works, and it actually works. So really cool. Yeah. Let's see, I'm almost done here. That's the structure sensor that we use. That's one way we do to scan. certain things. This is that group of history students again who had to do a life mask, and they didn't want to do the clay or the whatever it is they put on their face to do the mask, and they came to me and they're like, how can we do this? So we 3D scanned their face and then put it in Blender and cleaned it up, and then we 3D printed it. So this was our first attempt. Not horrible, but it was a cool way to use both those technologies, the 3D printing and the 3D scanning, and the 3D modeling to get it out. So if I wanted to, I could take that now and put it into VR or AR and explore it that way too. You can do room scale scanning with those headsets now. So if you want to scan your whole room, you can do that because there are cameras on the front. And so here's an idea of one of my rooms that I use. And what's neat is you can scan those with your headsets, and then the measuring tool is actually pretty accurate. So if you need to do some measurements, you can do that. And then if you scan your room, you can then use this software called Occidental, which will then convert it directly to a CAD file. Pretty amazing stuff. And then Matterport is a way for if you have a 360 camera or a 3D camera, or just scan it like I just did with the 3D scan, you can do 3D representations of your space. And down there at the bottom, South Huntington Library did a tour of their library this way, and it's a really great way to tour that library, especially now when we can't go in the physical space. This is the next best thing. And then I think I'm getting close to the end here. I know I'm talking a lot, but this is another fun project, another museum partnership. Libraries and museums are a perfect fit, in my opinion. So they were doing a Marty Balin, who was the founder of Jefferson Airplane. He was an artist too, and they wanted to do something interactive. So we got 10 of the most influential albums from 1969, excuse me. But then we added a component to it where we had these old iPads, if you took the album and put it behind an iPad, and a video popped off of it. And so this blew people away. It was really kind of easy to do. There's software that'll do it for you. But this was a way for them to look at the album, hold it, and then put it down, and then have it some kind of live thing come up that really kind of showcased that record. What I will say though, I don't know if it shows it here, but Jefferson Airplane actually shared my post. Which I was like, oh wow, that's pretty amazing. There's like 3 or 4 million followers on that page. So they're able to like, oh, look at this little library, what this little library guy is doing at this little local museum. I thought that's really a cool way to bring some visibility into what we actually do every day. And oh,
Chad, you still there? We lost you a bit. Uh-oh. All right, he's reconnecting. He'll be back in a second.
This is the Weather Channel, and they're calling this immersive mixed reality. So this is an interesting way. Imagine this being in schools. So he's talking about this tornado, but this is a way to really kind of emphasize the importance of getting to safety during a hurricane. And this video goes on and on. And after a while, this whole room is destructive. There's all kinds of. It really tells a story. I mean, it's, you know, I could see this actually happening in classrooms, in online classrooms down the road. And let's see. I think I'm gonna fast forward through all this stuff. I don't think there's really. Oh, and I'm proud of this. I'll say our Congressman Charlie Crist was tweeting a bunch of stuff about the importance of STEM and the importance of research and all this, and so I would retweet back to him saying, hey, you know, my innovation lab is really close to one of your offices. Why don't you, like, walking distance? He can walk there. And I said, why don't you come up and see what we're doing in STEM? And I would hear crickets. And then I kept replying to him. I kept replying. And finally, I get an email from his office saying, hey, he really wants to come in and check it out. And it was a chance for me to showcase what we're actually doing in the library. And I still communicate with him. He remembers who I am now, which is interesting. Every time I see him out, he remembers who I am, remembers the library where I work. So I think the value of this is to, if you're doing amazing things in your library, and probably a lot of people are, document it and share it and invite Congress type people in, invite people that aren't usually in the library in so they can see what's going on. Anyway, I know I probably talked too much. I think that's all I have for that, but let me stop sharing. And I'll exit this.
There you go.
So, yeah, I know I took up probably too much of your time, but there's just
No,
much.
it's fascinating. This is all about learning from people doing. So this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Oh, good.
So I'm curious, having what do you think holds back adoption of some of these technologies? When you're talking around and people go, "Oh, I see it, I understand it," they get excited. You know, what holds back the idea of now let's put this in place in my library?
I think the biggest thing is the cost factor. When I first got into VR a couple of years ago, I bought the headset. I was like, "Oh, this is great," but I did not realize that the computer that was going to run the headset was very expensive, like $1,500. So I had to write another grant to get a powerful computer to run the VR that I thought was ready to go. So cost, especially at the beginning, was obviously a huge factor. Now, though, you look at the Quest, which does not require a computer, and it's just as good as some of the other VR headsets. You can get one for $399 now. It's still expensive, but it's starting to finally lower down. And you can still experience this stuff and not have to be completely immersed. So a lot of those workshops we do where I'm in VR and there's a few other people in VR, there's people that are on their desktops that can still interact with the 3D content. So you can still do it. But yeah, I think cost is the main thing. And maybe there's a little bit of technical kind of learning curve too.
I think it's interesting. A lot of people, when you bring up Second Life, it's 9 times out of 10 people are going to make it the butt of a joke, and yet Second Life was one of the first really accessible, virtual environments. It had pretty quick uptake. It was experimented with in a lot of different settings, from library schools to a lot of folks doing it. I mean, the question about why it didn't keep going. I mean, I know it's still out there, but I think looking for those examples of where it works and where it works on scale, I think is that's a useful thing to do, if you will.
Yeah.
And one of the questions we just got was, what technology or app would you recommend for things like the image scanning and some music of albums? I'm going to take that for a larger question, which is, where would you start? Where would you start if you? Well, in scanning, yeah, start there.
You can easily start scanning with your phone. There's an app called Clone, and it's spelled QLONE. And you print out an actual sheet of paper that's like a little checkerboard looking thing, and you use your phone, and it creates like an AR dome over the object you want to scan, and you just kind of walk around it. And for the most part, I think the app is completely free. You can export it certain formats for free, and obviously there's a paid component too. I think, all of them have some kind of a paid component, but I've done a lot of great scans just off my phone. The funny story is I had a gentleman come in who had a young daughter who didn't have toes on one of her feet, and so he made shoes for her. And she was getting a little bit older, and she was kind of like, "Dad, I want something that looks a little bit better than what you're making me," right? And I was like, "Okay." So he asked if we could scan her feet, and I found this app, a podiatry app, that did amazing work on my phone. So then I asked the podiatrist, it was from France. I'm like, "Hey, this is amazing. Can I use this for other objects? Because I get requests to scan like tiny objects that are hard to redesign." And because you can use it for free. I scanned like a shark tooth one time, and it did amazing work. And he's like, "No, you have to be a podiatrist." I'm like, So our phones do true depth scanning, and this was the most amazing thing. So I would start with your phone, and then if you have an old Microsoft Connect, you can buy those on eBay now for $30, or go to an old GameStop. You might find them. You can turn those into 3D scanners. And yeah, and then just
So,
yeah, go ahead.
well, no, I was just going to ask you to broaden it out a little bit, which is okay. So I'm a public library, I'm an academic library, I'm a school library. I want to start playing with this. Where
Hmm.
do I start?
Well, you could start with a Google Cardboard set. And that's going to be the whole 3 DOF concept, though, 3 degrees of freedom. So it's not completely 6 degrees of freedom, which is virtual reality, but it's a start, and it's inexpensive, and you can build your own. And if you have a few phones lying around, you can do it. And then look at CoSpaces. You can use that for free for a while. If you have a classroom of like 10 or more, then you can buy a license for it. But it's cheap. I think I have 30 seats for $150 per year, which is pretty inexpensive. And the Friends of the Library bought it for us. Um, and then that's a way for you to get in and start learning how to develop in virtual reality. And it's more kind of, moving objects around and that kind of thing. There's not really that much programming. There is programming in it, though, if you want to get deep into it. So I would start with cospaces.edu, or cospaces.io is what it is. And just use the free version and just get in there and see what you can do. And then what's nice about CoSpaces is they have an app as well. So you can do the design wherever, and then you can bring it to your app and then showcase it in AR too. So it's not too difficult to get started. And
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what I would recommend is maybe getting it, learning just the basics, and then giving it to your kid, giving it to some kids at your school, or and just say, hey, what can you do with this, and let them run with it. You'd be amazed at how quick they pick it up.
Is there an interoperability issue? I mean, this is the classic, anytime there's a new sort of technology push, it becomes, all right, I created a model, or I created a program, or I created an environment in this piece of software, and you're talking about taking 3D objects, scanning them, putting them into textbooks, putting them in different areas. Are we farther along on that in terms of the ability to really work in multiple environments, or is it you're going to end up picking a software platform to go with?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you focus on the web VR standard, and there's actually a web XR standard now too, which I think is through Chrome. Pretty much all the browsers support that now. So if you keep it more kind of web-based, it's good. But there are programs out there that certain, like that thing I did with the live album covers. That was, I forget the name of the program now. That was an actual program that I used. So we had to download that software, put it on the iPads, and then I locked the iPads down so people had to use it. So to build that, I'd have to do a lot of work on something like that. So in that case, I have to use that proprietary software. But for most things, you can do it, a lot of it, in the browser with Web VR and Web XR.
Do you see people picking up, now that we're in this time of social distancing and isolation, as you mentioned, this is actually a great opportunity for this technology. And you mentioned the idea of holding some virtual meetings. You've seen other examples where people are really looking at this as a way of bringing people together. You mentioned Zoom in a VR environment.
Yeah, especially with that Spatial group. I've been testing with them for a while, and that is amazing. Like the other day, I had 10 people from all over the world in my living room. And I had, at that point, I had my Magic Leap on, so it was a computer on my head, but it wasn't that. I mean, I was in that room with them, my room with them, for a good hour and 15 minutes, and I never got fatigued from it. I'm like, oh hey, and now it works on my phone. So I'm like, I got this file, I'm gonna bring it in here. I found an article on spatial computing, and I just dragged it into my living room essentially, and then we're all looking at this article. And if you don't have that technology, you could then use the web app. You could go on to Chrome, go to our meeting, and then be on your webcam, and then I can bring your webcam into our space. So you're in there with us. You're just not like walking around in my room.
Right.
So it's like you're there with other people. It's really, really nice.
Have you had to sell this within your library in terms of getting the investment, in terms of moving forward, and then beyond the library, whether it's at the college level? I know you mentioned it's a co-use space, or at the city level. How does that work out for you?
I think as soon as I show them how you can drag any environment into where you are now, I think that's a big selling point. People are blown away by that. So if I'm teaching a group of nursing students and we're in a boring classroom, that's fine. I mean, they need to learn the theory, but if I can say, hey, let's put these screens on our faces for a minute, and now we're in this surgical room, where we can see where everything is placed, because you can go into a surgery area, and we've done this with the simulation stuff, and just scan that room. And once you've scanned it, you've got it. And you can bring it in any environment, virtual reality environment or even augmented reality. So I think that's the biggest selling point. And then the anatomy and physiology stuff is huge. To be able to bring any part of the human body into a space, even if it's minuscule, and bring it up to where you can see it in 3D and move it around, that's a pretty powerful teaching tool.
Yeah, I'm thinking I have a colleague at a community college in central New York, and I remember getting the tour and running across anatomical models, even the idea of dissected cat sitting in plastic, and what they were mentioning is how much space and how much of a management hassle it is for the physical items.
Yeah.
Right? The idea of where do we house them, how do we keep them from breaking, and how do we loan them out. And so when you were talking about the anatomy, and you were talking about the idea of being able to take these 3D models and explore them in much the same way that they have those physical spaces, it suddenly becomes an argument about saving maintenance, saving time, saving space, and growing access to different environments. So I can see that as a strong discussion.
It's funny, I never even thought of the saving space idea. I've never really brought that together. I'm always like hey, look how amazing this looks. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually going to steal that and add it to my arsenal of things to say, because yeah, I mean, it definitely does. You go into some of these science rooms and they've got just cabinets of stuff, and
Right.
you have to inventory all that. And with the spatial type stuff and the XR, VR, AR stuff, you can a lot of it's voice commands now. So I can be like, hey, display the heart, and it'll bring in the heart. So yeah.
So jumping back a little bit to the startup question, because I think, would you suggest that really you need two setups? And here's my thinking now, which is a lot of times when newer technology comes along, right? So the phenomenon tends to be it has a strong advocate, a strong, passionate person who's there, who can really explore it, wants to explore it, spends the time. Then it becomes a matter of, okay, we'll buy you one. And that then becomes problematic, because a lot of what I saw with the examples you're giving during this presentation, right? So I go back to when virtual reality was going to change the universe in 1989, right?
Right. Yeah.
Which was a great promise. But the radical difference between how people were thinking about virtual reality back then and how they're thinking about it today is not only the technological leap, but it is this conceptual leap from a person's experience in a environment to multiple people interacting, right? So I'm back to your video when you had students, the nursing students working on the heart. They were working together. They were collaborating. And so therefore, okay, fine, Chad, here's a HoloLens, go bother us later.
Yeah.
Is much less effective than buying two, right? Because then you can demonstrate and bring people in and show. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, it is. And if you look at like the HoloLens, that's a $3,500 machine that you wear on your head, and that most places can't afford that. And we're in discussions now with Magic Leap to try to bring in some Magic Leaps, but those are $2,500 a piece. So yeah, and it's way more powerful when you can actually do it like co-location, where you can have multiple people interacting with the same piece of digital content. I think now though, with like that spatial program, and you're starting to see people are able to interact with their phone, they're able to interact with a less expensive headset like a Quest, or in like a Zoom-like interface. I think that's going to help a lot, because quite frankly, I don't have the money in my budget at all to get another HoloLens. And the HoloLens 2, I don't even think is available for consumers anyway. So, and then you look at the social VR aspect. I mean, there's a program we use called Roomy, excuse me, and because I think you touched on this, VR is at the beginning was very an isolated experience. You hopped in by yourself. You were in this dark. You couldn't see anything. You actually, I mean, I had people accidentally hitting one another. They don't know that there's people watching. But with something like Roomy, it's now this social VR experience. And luckily, things are getting less expensive and more people can utilize it. But once you're in that virtual reality space, it's similar to Second Life. You know, you seem to be more engaged that way. Because like right now, you and I are talking, and I can see you can see me, and we're going back and forth. But if I was able to say, "Hey, look at this design I did," I could show it to you like this and move it around, and you'd be like, "Oh, okay." But if I'm able to like hand it to you, and then now it's in your space, and you're like, "Oh, you know, we can maybe piece something together." You know, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah,
But
you
yeah,
know, I remember talking with the Second Life people at the time, and one of the decisions they made was they wanted to stay as close as they could to sort of physical law. Now, I mean, you could still fly around and give
yeah,
yourself wings and such, but they were sort of adamant that like a foot of virtual space equaled a foot of real space, and you know, you couldn't like build a little hut and then go into it, sort of Doctor Who asked, have it bigger on the inside and be able to
yeah,
move things around and the dynamism. And I think, you know, one of the, when I get, excuse me, while my geek shows out, you know, when I think about creating these 3D spaces, there's something very compelling about replicating a physical space. And I get that. But I'm really intrigued about how you can truly take advantage of the 3D space in a computational way to create all different ways of interacting, and not only in the macro and micro scale, but things that you just physically couldn't recreate.
right.
I think of the sort of creative opportunity there as well as the educational opportunities.
Yeah.
So where do you see this going? What, you know, what is this something that, I mean, because I know that Apple, for example, is talking about with their next wave of devices, including something with true spatial cameras on the back as opposed to what they have now.
Yeah.
You see larger adoption at the sort of consumer level where it sort of comes along with, or is this, you know, we're looking at, you mentioned, I apologize, I forget the specific software, but I've seen real estate companies, for example, move very quickly to this kind of environment to create 3D tours of
Yeah.
properties and such. But so
Hmm.
what should we be looking for? What's coming down the road?
I really do see the devices getting less expensive, and I see them becoming more glass-like. You know, wearing like glasses like we have on now. Remember Google glasses
Yeah.
back? They were, you know, we had one, and they weren't quite ready for prime time yet. But now I look back, I'm like, wow, they were getting there. So I'm thinking with the 5G networks coming and being able to do that split rendering, which means a lot of the processing is happening at the tower before it even comes to your device, because our phone, most everybody has a phone.
Okay.
This is a pretty powerful processor. So if the 5G network is doing the processing before it even hits my phone, then it's going to be powerful. And then if the glasses are $200, prescription glasses, that's another problem we didn't even touch on. So I mean, I wear glasses, putting VR headset over my glasses is not cool. You know, it
Right.
doesn't work. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yes, I do.
they have inserts and stuff that you can do, but eventually we're going to get to a point where we wear these glasses, and they're not as clunky and they're powerful enough to run off our phones and part of the 5G network doing split rendering. Then I think it's going to see some wide adoption. And I'm always asking myself, is it going to get to a point where it just gets gimmicky and people just don't care? I don't know. Who knows, you know? But I think for education, though, I think there's a huge benefit for it, because again, you can explore the unexplorable. You can go into places that you're really not allowed to go into sometimes, you know, and just see the small stuff that you can't see otherwise.
Yeah.
You know?
The software that blew me away several years ago, and Microsoft put it out, and I'm once again blanking on the name, but it was the idea that they could use the geolocation data from all these publicly available photos, and they could computationally merge them into
Oh,
3D models and allow
wow.
you to then therefore scale back and forth, right? So they got all the images of Notre Dame, and you could see it. And then as you move closer, what happens is they once again have all this data where they've computationally mapped it together, and photo stitched together. And so it was, it was like that. You suddenly go, that's taking 3D or 2D images, things we do on a regular basis, existing data, and then really using it for 3D exploration that you couldn't do otherwise, right? It becomes a novel but useful application. And I see examples of that going back and forth about how we move them together.
Yeah. I've been to the Notre Dame Cathedral, and it's stunning and it's beautiful, and I would never want to take it back. Like if I had a choice to either go there or experience it in a 3D virtual reality area, I would go there in a second, because the sounds, the smells, the food, all that stuff is there. Although there are things you can wear now that present smells and stuff to you, but so for me, it's always better to go to the place. But if you can't, which we're starting to see now, we can't go places. This is, I think, the next best thing. And if it's doing it realistically, LiDAR scanning and that's that you mentioned with Microsoft, and it's that real, then it's almost like the real thing.
Yeah, photosynth, I think is what they called it. Are you familiar at all with Gartner Group's hype cycle?
No.
Okay, so let me see. Now I get to play with toys too. Hold on a second. I think I could do this. Okay, so hopefully we see a whiteboard.
I do. Yep.
All right. So there's the classic diffusion of innovation, right, which is Everett Rogers, right? So the idea is that you have early adopters, or you have innovators, early adopters, majority adoption, and then laggards by the end, right? So here's us at the bleeding edge. If it's new and it doesn't work, we don't care. We're willing to put up with all the bugs so that we can play with it. This is, we're the cool kids on the block. This is, well, everyone's got one. This is, why don't you have one? And this is clearly you don't get the message that life has moved on, right? So, so this is the one that everyone talks about, diffusion of innovation. But the one I like is the Gartner Group, and they talk about something called the hype cycle, and it looks something like this. And the idea is, new technology X comes along. It's going to solve all our problems. It's going to change the universe as we know it. Clearly, as mankind, we have been living in the caves until it came along, right? And so then what happens is, but you know what? It's not that new. It's not that cool. It's buggy. Sometimes it doesn't work. Oh my God, why did we ever think about it? We wasted our time. Go away. And then eventually, so this is, I think they call this the trough of disillusionment. And then eventually it comes going, well, it doesn't solve all the world problems, but it does a really great job with X, Y, or Z. Right, and so this is, and I think different technologies from immersive virtual reality to augmented reality have gone through probably multiple cycles. And so when you think about, when Apple, which Apple certainly didn't invent it, but when Apple began pushing their augmented reality engine because they had such an installed base, it was, they really saw people are going to do virtual shopping. People are going to be, putting things in their living room to do design work. People are going to have the best games we've ever heard of. And they tried it. And then they eventually found out there's a limitation between two cameras, that people didn't think that way. They weren't used to it. It wasn't in their way. So therefore, it was a waste of time. But then, as you mentioned, studying anatomy in an augmented reality environment is better now than it ever was before.
Right.
So why I like this, and it's not drawn to scale, is it, I think, is a little bit more subtle than Everett Rogers' work is always sort of, well, once it's adopted, it's adopted. And I think what I like about this one is it says something to the effect of, they're all waves of adoption, and it really is based on people's expectations. And so, if you think about that, and once again, if you want to break it down by virtual or augmented reality, let's take virtual reality. Where do you think it is on that hype cycle? Is it something where it's just climbing into people's awareness, or is it a situation with things like you mentioned, Magic Leap? There was such a sort of build up to what could happen, that when it didn't happen, people just sort of,
Yeah, I'll use two examples with Magic Leap. I'll say that I followed them from day one, and they're a Florida company. And I was like, oh, I saw these videos. I'm like, I'm so excited to see this. I'm blown away. I wrote a grant for it, all this stuff. I'm excited. And then when I tried it, I was a little let down. You know, the field of view wasn't what I expected. Same with the HoloLens. The HoloLens was the same way. So I was like, you know, I don't know. You know, so my expectations were shot. You know, I was like, okay, I was expecting it to be more than that. So VR for me though has always been wow. You know, so XR and you know the spatial computing and mixed reality stuff is, I think there's quite a hype still, and it's not quite there. But then you get something like Pokemon Go that brings that into the picture, and people are like, oh, this is augmented reality. This is really amazing. So then I think about going back to virtual reality, and I've always been kind of blown away by it. So now you look at somebody like Facebook who buys Oculus. And so then they start to innovate, and now you can buy a Quest, which is very powerful, for $399. And now Facebook is trying to create this social network that is going to be VR. I forget the name of it now. I signed up for their beta thing too. I forget the name right now. But so I think they've got some big plans. So once Facebook brings in, you know, more of their VR stuff, and they start enhancing their Quest and their Oculus stuff, that's when I think it's going to start to get more popular. But then I try to picture groups of people hanging out with these big things on their heads all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't see that happening. At home, like right now, I'm so glad I got my VR headsets.
Interesting.
You know? But if it's nice out and I'm allowed to go outside and do something, I'm going to go outside and do something. Right. And I think most people are probably like that, except maybe the hardcore gamers.
Yeah, I've been so excited that my 16-year-old son has managed to open his windows. It's very exciting for us.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And you know, the other thing I'm just thinking about, so with something like photosynth, where it was like this data put into different applications, if you think about it, a lot of the 3D scanning work that we need to build a lot of virtual is happening as we speak. I've a brother who's a Tesla fanatic, and when you look and you drive in a Tesla, you realize it's doing, using cameras, it's scanning the environment as it goes and creating three-dimensional models, creating 3D systems that's data that could then theoretically be put towards large-scale imaging, large-scale virtual reality environment creation for planning and infrastructure design, things of that nature. So we're getting the kind of data that can lead into producing these compelling environments.
Oh yeah. Same with the Google Street cars. Those are like mobile 3D scanners driving around, and they can read signs now. You know, so a Google car will go by and see a sign that says closed, and it scans that, adds it to its database, and when you go to search for that restaurant or whatever, it says it's closed. And I think that's from its scanning capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a lot of capturing environments, and I know that MIT has worked on things like using Wi-Fi signals as 3D scanning, looking for different objects within it, how it reflects and such. So sometimes our surveillance society will work in our favor, I promise. Chad, any last thoughts before we run out of time here?
I just think if anybody wants to test any of the stuff that I'm doing, like early access or beta testing on, feel free. I'll give you my contact. If you want to get on some of these lists, then I'd be happy to join you in that space. And just stay safe out there too. It's a weird time.
It is. Thank you so much. And so I'm hoping that we'll have this up later today, early tomorrow. And if we'll get a hold of Chad's slides, we'll make sure those are available as well. Chad, I want to thank you very much for taking the time and sharing. This is for me what makes librarianship a great profession, is that we're always willing to experiment and share that experiment as we do it. So it's well appreciated.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, all. Hopefully we'll see a lot of you back next week. We're going to talk about literacy through music. We're going to talk about data privacy and data detoxing. And I really appreciate everyone's participation and involvement. Right now we're scheduled through the end of April. I'm going to put out a survey to see if we want to keep going with this, potential topics. Once again, thanks to Chad Mairn, and thanks to Grace Jones, my GA, for making sure this works. Stay safe and wash your hands. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you. Bye-bye.